All right, a big shake-up on Super Tuesday, as you just heard. For more, let's bring in Florida Senator Marco Rubio. Good morning, Senator.
Hey, good morning.
I know down in Florida, you and some of the president's allies were maybe eager to face Bernie Sanders as a Democratic socialist, some of his recent controversial comments on Fidel Castro, among others. What are your thoughts this morning? Is Joe Biden back?
Well, he did very well last night. There's no way to doubt it. I think it's pretty clear evidence that the Democratic Party has a very strong establishment who clearly weighed in. I heard from a number of people that a number of establishment figures in the Democratic Party were calling candidates and reaching out to get people to step aside before Super Tuesday. And that certainly helped Joe Biden. So you can see evidence of that, you know, that the Democratic establishment sort of stepped forward and put their finger on the scale here to get those results. And I think that'll continue. They themselves apparently don't want to see Bernie Sanders as the nominee. But these races nowadays take a lot of twists and turns. So whoever the nominee is, we know it's someone who's going to take us backwards in terms of some of the policies. If it's Joe Biden, it'll be a continuation of the Obama policies or a return to them. If it's Bernie Sanders, it's Marxism. So either one are bad for the country.
A lot of you've been through this process before. Last one on Super Tuesday. Difficult decisions about whether to get out, whether you're running out of money. Michael Bloomberg doesn't have a money problem, but he has a delegate problem. Your colleague Elizabeth Warren is also in a lot of trouble as well. What do you think's going through their minds this morning?
Well, here's what happens, right, is at the end of the day, you could be doing very well and have strong support, but once you don't do as well as expected or don't begin to win, the momentum flow begins to happen and you start to lose support. People don't want to vote for someone that they think is not going to win. They don't want to vote for someone that they think doesn't have a chance to win. And so you can see the bottom fall out pretty quickly. And that combined with, except for the case of Michael Bloomberg, you got to start thinking every day I stay in this race is a day that I take on campaign debt if you're not raising money fast enough. And this is money I'm going to have to raise for years to come to pay off. So my sense is we're going to have a two-person race here pretty quickly between Biden and Sanders, and then we'll see what happens.
And Senator, we also wanted to ask you about the coronavirus emergency bill. Of course, there's a lot to get to here. Politico reporting today that House and Senate leaders have run into last-minute snags on this $7.5 billion emergency package to fight the spread of the coronavirus. Your thoughts on that?
Well, we can't afford a snag. The last thing this country needs right now, facing growing concerns about the spread of the virus, is for another issue that gets gridlocked here in Washington, D.C. This country desperately needs right now its political leadership to be able to take effective action. And one of those things that we can do is ensure that the money and the resources are available so that counties and states and hospitals and healthcare providers have the resources available to deal with the people that have already been infected and to prevent future infections. There's more work to be done. We got to develop an antiviral medication like we use Tamiflu now for the flu to help and then ultimately develop a vaccine. But this needs to happen, and this is the first step. If we can't even get something like this passed, then people are going to be right to lose confidence in the ability of their federal government to deal with something like this. So it really should not break down. I cannot imagine there is any issue so important that we would not act on this and act on this quickly.
Sure, and so many people are invested in this. I want to get your take on Chuck Schumer. Play a piece of sound here.
I have said that we need about $8.5 billion. And from all reports, the appropriators are very close to that number, rather than the $2.5 billion the president talked about early on. And that's good, because when it comes to Americans' health, when it comes to our safety, when it comes to dealing with this problem head on, skimping doesn't make any sense at all.
Sounds like you're on the same page. Your thoughts on Schumer?
Well, look, that's the number he came up with. I think the White House, I don't know what it was based on, but it's fine. The White House, the president said last week, he'll sign whatever we pass, whatever we come up with. If we want $8.5 billion, he'll sign that. I don't think the White House is against $8.5 billion. I think the point here is that we got to get something done, and it may be more. It may require us to go back and do more later on. But I think that speech and what we saw last week, and I'm glad we've walked away from that, at least somewhat, is some people trying to figure out what is it the president for, then let's ask for more, then whatever number he comes out with, let's ask for more so we can say that he's trying to skimp. We got to put that stuff aside. Let's fight about everything else. But this is a public health emergency that we need to confront. And I hope that that's what's going to happen. We need to get this thing done.
You're right. There was some politics that was being played. There was a lot of frustration in the public about that. Now it seems like folks are trying to come together and fix this. Let's quickly get to another important topic, which is bringing an end to the war in Afghanistan. The president yesterday telling reporters that he spoke to a top Taliban official. Let's hear that and we'll let your reaction.
We had a very good conversation with the leader of the Taliban today, and they're looking to get this ended, and we're looking to get it ended. I think we all have a very common interest. We'll find out about the country itself, but the country really has to get it ended. We've been there for 20 years.
The president has an important goal there. He's optimistic. Real quick, there's a military spokesperson saying the Taliban is not holding up its end of the deal. March 3rd alone, the Taliban conducted 43 attacks at checkpoints in Helmand. The Taliban claimed to be fighting to free Afghanistan from international forces. The February 29th agreement provides a conditions-based plan for withdrawal. But this military spokesperson says, Senator, the Taliban is not holding up its end of the deal. Can we trust them?
No, I don't think we can trust them. And the bottom line is that the Taliban, what they want is institute a severe version of Sharia law and no elections. That's what they want. They have the battlefield advantage over the government of Afghanistan. And here's the problem. If I thought an enduring U.S. presence there could lead to a different result in 3 years, in 5 years, in 2 years, that'd be one thing. But I've reached a point now where I come to believe that we would have to be there forever to keep the Taliban from getting what they want. And a permanent U.S. presence in Afghanistan is just not feasible. So I hope this works out, but I want to be frank with everybody. I think the likeliest outcome at the end of the day is once the U.S. leaves, within a short period of time, the Taliban will retake the country, will reinstitute Sharia, will not have elections. They may or may not allow terrorist groups to operate from their territory, which is our #1 concern there. Yeah. But I don't think we were there for 10 years. It might change the outcome at this point.
But, sir, that's a chilling scenario because of the possibility that the Taliban could start planning more terror attacks aimed at the American homeland. In the last 30 seconds we have, what's the balance we need to strike here?
Well, the hope is that there would be an Afghan government that could assume control and control the country and be an alternative and push out the Taliban. But that's an effort that's been going on now for over a decade, and it hasn't seemed to work that way. Even right now, as they try to negotiate, the Afghan government is divided. 2 people claim to be president. They can't even figure that part of it out. They've consistently lost territory to the Taliban. If we would have to be there forever to prevent the Taliban from taking over the country at this point. I hope that something different turns out to be true, but we can't be there forever either.
Yeah, Senator Marco Rubio covering a lot of ground with us this morning. Sir, we appreciate your time.
Thank you.